that's it for the portfolio company introductions. Now we actually have a very special keynote speaker, Matiss Ansviesulis, who is a serial finance entrepreneur whose businesses have generated more than 100 million in combined revenue. And he's here today to basically give his story, share his business experience, and maybe some tips and tricks or maybe do's and don'ts. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It was very offensive. You said 100 million. Actually, it's 200 million. So I've been given the opportunity to describe how I built a company that does a lot of revenue in 20 minutes, which is like, you know, explaining how I lived my life for 15 years in a couple of slides, which is basically mission impossible. But I like impossible missions, so let's try it. Before I jump into it, let me just understand who we have in the audience. Maybe if you could raise your hand if you're not from Latvia. So maybe we could switch to Latvian altogether.
No way.
Fair enough, fair enough. Raise your hand if you have your own business, if you employ your own people and have your own company. Okay, serious, okay. And raise your hand if you operate in more than one country, whether you're whichever place you're from. Okay, serious audience. Cool. That's nice. Let's try to go through my CV. I'll try to make it fun. So I've started a number of companies now. I have 8 different businesses, primarily in fintech, lending companies, consumer, B2B, an investment platform, and a number of other things. I'll talk about that in the next slide. I started my business journey in 2010. The combined revenue of the businesses that I've started as of last year is over 200 million euros. That's not transaction volume, that's the actual revenue. So the companies employ, I think, well over 1,000 people in around 10 different countries. The story started with Rīgas valsts pirmā gimnāzija. You know what that is? Any idea? Okay, Latvians do know. So it's the best school in Latvia, or I consider it the best. It's a math school. So I got into that. I was very keen for the secondary school part, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. That kind of gave me a bit of maths background that I went to study at university in the UK. And after that, I thought I'm going to join a big bank. And after a lot of job applications, most of them rejected me. One bank took me in, which was JP Morgan. I was very happy, and I thought I'm going to be a star trader on the trading floor. But it turns out I was not very good at taking orders, and I made a lot of mistakes booking things in. So I kind of spent like a year and a half there, and in parallel to starting my work in JP Morgan, that's when I thought I'm gonna, instead of work for a company, I'd rather try to build a company. And so me and my back then best friend, Davis, who was in Latvia still, we thought, okay, let's try to do something. I'll talk how I got to this idea, but I just wanted to share a quick story about JP Morgan. I rarely mention this, but there was a fun fact. 2012, early 2012, when I left the bank job, the bank experienced the biggest corporate loss in its whole history, $6 billion. You remember this? That there was this guy called London Whale. He was a big credit markets trader. Any idea? It was like an obscure story, but pretty big back then. You remember? All right, nice. And a few more people. So this London Whale worked in a department called the Chief Investment Office. It was like a proprietary trading desk where the bank was trading its own money, based in London. And then there was another guy who also worked in that department, and that guy was me. And so it turns out, I just found out, that I had worked in the same department as that guy. Of course, I would love to say that I had something to do with this $6 billion loss, but I didn't. I was just an Excel rat back then. But yeah, that was my beginning of the finance career. And like I said, then in parallel to the bank job, we started thinking about what business we could build on our own with my friend. We were exchanging ideas over Skype back then. We used Skype, and we kind of always ended up with concluding that we just don't have enough money, or we just don't have any money to start any business. And so the thinking was, wouldn't it be cool if you could just get some money quickly online, so you could either spend it or start a business or something like that. The paradox was that We ourselves, like I said, had no money. We had no understanding of how to build a business. We were like 21, 22 years old, fresh out of university. But, and then I thought also, like, would I ever give some stranger any amount of money over the internet that I've never seen and never met? Would I give that person my own capital? And of course, the answer was no, never, right? And the next thing you know, a couple of months later, we started doing exactly that. So we opened a small website, we started giving these small loans to consumers, we kind of did everything ourselves. And then, as they say, long story short, 10, 12 years later, we sold the business for a transaction value which was over 50 million to Capitec, a big retail bank in South Africa. The first business was called Free Finance. Raise your hand if you've heard of the business. Okay. Oh, cool. All right, thanks. Now it's rebranded to Abafin, but that was the original name. So that's the first phase of my career. I'll go through this quickly. So the first phase was I was a CEO, I was a founder, I was spending all my energy on this one thing, one company, one story. Coming out from Green Finance since 2020, basically. I've taken more of a, I wouldn't call it serial entrepreneur, I kind of don't like the name, but like a company builder, right? So I continue building companies, fintech space, within the space that I understand well. What I do is I look for products, for markets, for interesting combinations of the things that we know how to do and the infrastructure we have, but to do it, for example, in a new country, right? And when I figure out this new combination of product market fit, then I try to look for a CEO, I give them shares, I invest the seed capital, and then that CEO, that person that has like, let's say 10-20% of the equity in the business, then they do all the day-to-day stuff, and then I get involved in terms of controlling and some strategy and things like that. There are a couple of companies here I'll just talk through very quickly. So Free Finance, renamed Latvian, that was the first one. Esketit, anybody is an investor on Esketit platform? All right, after this presentation, sign up. So basically, Esketit, there's another much better known probably company called Matiss. So it's a marketplace for investments, right? You can go on this platform, invest anywhere from 100 euros up to however much you have, and make 10, 12, 15% interest per year with monthly interest payments. The money goes into my companies and I use it to finance the loan book of the different businesses. We have over 20,000, 25,000 registered investors. New School, that's an embedded finance business, which basically means we go to other finance institutions, sometimes even like retail chains, and we help them build lending products so that they serve those to their end customers. So for example, you have a retail chain that sells phones. Your customers to be able to afford the phones, and if they cannot afford it in one payment, you kind of pay later. And so we provide the technology, the services, the portfolio management and things like that. So that's what we do in Mexico. Money for Finance is a bit of a weird name. So this is a consumer lending business we started a few years ago in Jordan. Yes, it has close to 500 employees. There's a lot of call centers. There's a lot of manual operation. LoanMe, that's another lending business we started a couple of years ago in Sri Lanka. Over 1 million users of our app. So it's an app-based lending business. And then Spanda Capital. That's basically an asset management and investment management business where in Spain we go and buy overdue non-performing loan portfolios, from banks, from non-banks, all sorts of financial institutions, and then we give them to collection agencies, and we try to make a spread in between. So it's like a real estate type of business, yes. Very thing. All right. So. I wanted to split the different criteria that I think helped us build these different companies, different success factors into 3 groups, yes? Because the topic of the presentation today is what were the things that I think helped me build these different companies, yes? So the first group, as you can see, I named it beautifully, the basics, yes? Because I think there is some kind of an entry ticket into the party, and if the party is building a big business, or if it's whatever success you want to have, there are some basics that need to be there. Without those basics, there's no conversation of any type of success. So my basics, first thing is obvious things. ambition, hard work, all of those things that I'm sure you all guys have. Meditation, 4 a.m. morning routines, gratitude journal. I'm kidding, the last one I'm joking about. So those are the obvious things. The less obvious things are things like what I would call massive hunger, and I think that's kind of underestimated. So, entrepreneurs usually position that they want to solve a problem, that they want to make the world a better place, and things like that. For me, I just had a massive hunger for being in control. Yes, not even necessarily making money. Of course, money is a side product, but that wasn't kind of the end objective. My objective was to kind of really be in control, in charge, in my own life, right? And the best way for me to do that was to build a big company. Yes, and the bigger, the better, because I was in control of more resources and more people and so on. So that was a very personal motivation that worked for me. Massive energy. So I think, like in this room right now, I think massive energy is something that you have to have, irregardless of your IQ, your kind of emotional intelligence, all these other good things. Especially in business, if you don't have the energy to come up with an idea, to put all the work in, to build it out into reality, to test things, to experiment, which takes a lot of energy. It's simply like a lot of waking up, doing and doing and doing it again. Unless you have that energy, then I think it's very difficult, especially in business, to go anywhere. So that's also one of the basics. And then the last one, massive passion, which I guess people again say you have to love what you do. And in my case, I didn't have like entrepreneurship dreams in the childhood that I'm gonna create companies. I wanted to work in a construction company like my father, back when I was a teenager. So those things kind of evolved. But when I got to start the first business was when I felt like I'm really in the right place and doing the right thing for me. And that's when I felt like I loved what I'm doing. Before that, it was just struggle, testing, and finding my own way. And what I love doing is working with people and working with numbers and also implementing processes and structures, right? So I'm not extremely passionate about innovation or the particular product that my company is doing. I'm more passionate about building great teams and building a sizable organization. Yeah? So those are the basics. Let me go into, I'd call it like the second category, which is our recipe or my recipe. Things that's like the ingredient that worked specifically in my companies. And I split, of course there's many more, but these are the ones that I could think of kind of easily. So early expansion abroad, so I think this was pretty interesting. So I guess obviously if you come from a small country like Latvia, are all of you from small countries, or there are some from big markets like UK or Sweden, or pretty much most of
Finnish people here.
Okay, Finnish. Small countries, still small. I would classify it as small. Finnish people, all right. That's good. That's cool. So for us, the story of the early expansion wasn't that. So first of all, we knew we're from a small country. We want to build a big business. We have to go abroad. That's like common sense. But it wasn't a vision that we know we're going to have a huge company across like different countries and all of that. The reason that happened is we started in Latvia in around 2010. For about a year, we ran the business kind of in parallel to our day jobs. It was like an evening, weekend thing. But we felt like it could be something, and we really focused on trying to build out the business. But then the Latvian government said that you have to obtain a license to continue doing consumer loans. Or if you want to do consumer loans, you have to have a license. The license costs 50,000 lats, which is 70,000 euros. So for comparison, back then, end of 2010, our loan portfolio was like 30,000 euros. Yes, so that was like now getting a $500 million license. It was completely impossible. So we thought, okay, instead of like just dying, let's try to open up the same business just in a different country, and then Latvia is going to all like disappear, but then we're going to have like a backup option, right? And so we chose Czech Republic for different reasons I can mention later, and that's how we expanded into Czech, right? It was just actually like forced by some circumstances. We ended up being able to continue the Latvian business, but we got into Czech, and that gave us a few few beliefs and few learning points. Number one is we learned that we can scale this company, and we've learned it very quickly. if we didn't have the situation in Latvia, we would probably stay there for a couple more years. We wouldn't learn how to do business across different countries and all these things. So one is we figured out that we can scale this business pretty well. We can copy the IT system. We can copy some of the customer acquisition channels, and basically you can do this business in other countries. So that belief was very important. We got it early. Same with funding. So we funded a little bit the Latvian business. I mean, funded the first ticket was like 30,000 euros. So that's what I mean by funding at this stage in the early years. Then in Czech Republic we found a different investor, and so we basically had to do like 2 startups that are doing the same service, the same product in parallel. But so we were forced to fund two companies at the same time. So that forced us also to learn the funding game quite early on. And the third point was doing business abroad. So for an experienced audience, this seems basic, but when you're 21 and you're trying to build a company abroad in a foreign market, you have your home country, different types of teams, you start scaling, hiring, project management, communication, all of these things. It's quite a challenge, right, for a young guy. And so we were forced again to be in that position where we had to learn to do that. And so what it gave us is a belief that we, means myself and my co-founder, that we can do this. We don't need to be Stanford tech graduates, some exceptional talent to be able to build an international company, right? Some regular bros from Eastern Europe could build an international business. So we got that belief kind of accidentally early on, right? And that belief was a game changer for us. All right. So more details in terms of fundraising. So obviously our businesses are capital intensive. Like I would say, like half of the success of our company depends on access to capital and doing fundraising well. Unlike in different business models, right? So this was obviously key. The early days of how we funded was through basically through angel investors. Back then, what was their name? Angel investors, rich Russians, right? We used to call them rich Russians. Now they're angel investors. We would raise mostly the kind of package was okay. Let's raise 200K or like 100K, a couple of 100,000 euros of debt, super expensive debt, 24% per year, 36% per year, 48% per year. We would pay the interest on a monthly basis, like you would do to the rich Russians, and then a little bit of equity, yes. And that was the package. That's kind of like the format of fundraising, how we started the first couple of years. Then the other thing that worked for us with fundraising, because we had this like debt-centric fundraise in the beginning, is we learned to make the company investable, right? There's this nice term which I like very much, an investable company. Investable company, oftentimes in the startup space, people understand it as a sexy story that has a nice pitch deck. You kind of like address a big market, a big problem, and all those things. That's very cool, but that's easy. What's harder is if you have a relatively small company across different countries and you have your audited financial statements in order and they match your management reports, right? So that a professional investor looks at you and they see that you know your stuff and your financials, your ducks are in the row. So that's what I mean by an investable company. We also learned to explain the risk management principles, which were important, credit risk management or scoring and things like that, to a third party, to an investor very early on, right? So that made us investable and professional. And the last point, which worked pretty well for us, is what I would call spread and then centralized, which meant that we took this rich Russian money for individual countries. We would take let's say $500,000 of funding from one investor, go into Poland, give that investor, let's say 30-40% share, which is crazy. It's insane, right? It's a lot of equity. It's too much. And we would repeat that and do that at the same time, and we would open several countries per year, year after year, right? And then a couple of years later, we had let's say 5 different countries, and then we started looking for more institutional investors or bigger funds, and then once that happened, we had more negotiation leverage against any separate individual angel investor that was holding shares in any particular market. Yes, make sense? All right, that is that. Another thing which we focused on was fast market testing. Again, for the reason that we were funded mostly through debt. The funding was always kind of short, so we had to do things fast. And so one of the things we learned to do is launch at low cost. So we were bootstrapped, cost efficient. So we had that kind of culture. Like I would compare now, we were the deep sea of consumer lending back in the day. So that worked for us well. When we look in a new country, we would go into where there's an existing competition, somebody that already has done the hard work, educated the customer. We would copy with pride, as they say. We would often open offices in some shitty apartments. We would live in those same apartments. Eventually that strategy didn't work anymore. For some reason, employees didn't like it. But that was kind of like, in the early days, that was the focus. Second thing is, we adapted the product product features to local needs, to local customers, which seems like an obvious thing to do, but we had a bunch of different, bigger competitors coming from the UK. Maybe you've heard of a company called Vonga? Yeah, some. So Vonga was like the hottest fintech back in, I'd say, 2010, 11, massively successful lending company in the UK. Then they entered in Poland, and they had this extremely high pricing for their loans. So they kind of like, they innovated this big data scoring terminology. They suck up a lot of data about consumers online, and then they kind of come up with scoring, and they make this loan approval process automated, right? Very successful, profitable. They went into Poland, and then they had to face different competitors in Poland who were giving their loans for free in the beginning to get more customers coming to the door, so they couldn't compete with their extremely high prices, right? And they thought that their UK kind of mentality would work everywhere, which was completely not the case. So there are many examples, I don't have time to go through all of them, where we, coming from a small country, we assume that every single big market that we enter is going to be completely different. It's not like the way we do it in Latvia is going to be the way it fucking happens in Mexico, right? It's just not the mentality. So we're very adaptive that way. And the last thing is we ran parallel tests. So we would go into different countries, we would open or launch a few different products at the same time with different teams, with different funding flows going to those individual teams separately for them to see kind of what works and what doesn't. And so that again gave us kind of faster time to market and ability to experiment faster. All right, let's see what else we have. The last one would be building strong teams. So I guess it's not revolutionary to say that you need to have a strong team when you want to build a good business. But we did, I think, a lot of interesting experiments, and because we didn't have like a big VC, round and some experienced board members that helped us and thought how things are done, we were just experimenting through trial and error a lot ourselves. And one of the things that we figured out quickly, which also carried into my experience of building individual businesses, was to hire the country manager as the first person, right? And again, it seems like, 10 years later, it seems like fucking obvious, but when you're doing it for the first time, like we were in Czech Republic, we did everything ourselves, literally like opening the bank accounts, registering the company, all of this stuff we did ourselves to kind of maybe learn. Maybe it was exciting, we wanted to save costs, and it was a disaster. It just didn't work, right? Because we were not very good with the local culture, language barriers, and all these things. And so the next time we opened a new country, I think it was Poland, we hired the country manager, focused on that country manager to be a great, capable person. I mean, you never know, but that's the focus. We gave them the budget, we gave them the back office resources, the funding, and then we said, like, just go execute, yes? And that was, the approach that worked for us ever since. And with that last piece is experimentation and decentralization. So what I mean by that is, again, because we're coming from a small country, we went into different markets, different countries, wherever we could find the best people. So we never had a mindset of, okay, we're going to have Latvia, like a head office, all the key people here, we're going to come up with these processes and like, these ways of doing things here, and then we're going to scale them or roll them out in different countries. It was completely decentralized. So as an example, we ended up having our IT hub, and it's still there for the first company, in Austria. yeah, outside of Vienna. That's where our IT department is, about 40 or so people. The biggest market by number of customers ended up being Mexico. The biggest number of employees that we have in call centers, telesales, and people like that, project managers, is Poland. The biggest investor before they bought the whole company was a South African bank. And we were like random Latvian entrepreneurs in the middle of it. So we were always looking at, wherever we could just find the best people, and that's where we kind of spread around. It not always worked, but that was the approach. All right, the last category is what I would call just luck, right? You agree that a big part of any success is just luck? Yes, no? Yeah. Happy to hear. Just luck. So the more I kind of like, get older, I would say, and I look at different types of companies, different stories, the more I realize like the luck element, just pure, I mean, of course you need to work hard and again, like expose yourself to circumstances that bring you more luck and so on. But really there's just a huge element is just pure luck, yeah? And I would say for us, these couple of things were like fundamental in our success, and I can only deduct this after I had sold the company, and then I looked back and understood, okay, these are important here. So one is emerging trend. So fintech was emerging, it's still, I think the biggest startups, highest value, most successful in Europe are coming from fintech, right? Fintech works in Europe. We were in a small subcategory of fintech. The online consumer lending trend was appearing, and I would say it was one of the hottest trends in Europe in 2010 to 2015. Completely is not anymore, but was a big trend. Crypto came, then challenger banks came, but we just managed to jump on that trend. Second is light market regulation. So again, obviously many companies, especially in heavily regulated markets like finance and healthcare, if you manage to build something that is not yet regulated, you already are you have a massive advantage. And we had that same thing. We could just go into almost any country, set up a basic LLC, pay 5,000 euro paid capital, and build a system, open a website, and boom, you start lending to consumers, right? Which is impossible in most of the countries in the world today, right? Not only EU, it's anywhere, Southeast Asia, Latin, Middle East. Nowadays, we're building these lending businesses. We have a pipeline of, many countries. We're just basically sitting and waiting for fucking approval from the central bank, right? And employing my favorite people, compliance people that are just writing documents about how they're writing documents. So that's the reality now, right? So if you try to do this business now, good luck. Sound business model, it's fundamentally profitable, scalable. Like I said in another presentation, that there are only two business models that are as old as Bible. One is lending, the other one is prostitution. Okay, never mind. And so basically lending helped us to be able to get money from customers early on. We didn't have to worry about monetization all the time. We therefore didn't have to worry about going to VCs and being dependent on funding rounds. So that helped. And the last one is founders didn't kill each other. So this is something, easily to be underbooked. But I've seen some startups where I've invested that were very successful and fundamentally good ideas, good companies, good teams. But when the founders get into arguments, then that's the beginning of the end. In our case, not to say that we didn't have arguments or that we are not having differences of opinion with my main co-founder, and also by founders, people that are equal in the company. I don't mean there's a guy that has 90% and then there's a guy that has 10%. Those are maybe co-founders, but those are not equal partners, right? So we operate with these different businesses on an equal partnership kind of basis, and that's very challenging. It's on par with marriage, I would say. And so you have to really invest a lot of energy to make sure that this founder relationship is successful, because a lot of the business depends on the success at the top. And also what makes it more challenging as the company goes through different phases of growth, right? And when you start making a lot of money, and individual people in the business, become rich, then somebody wants to retire, somebody wants to work far less, somebody's not any more excited. So these are all big kind of tests to founder relationships, and we have worked a lot together to kind of overcome challenges like that. All right, I think that's it. Usually I put this on the slide. Nelson Mandela, he has this great quote, which you can read. It always seems impossible until it's done. So that's how I always feel about, you know, building big businesses. You kind of like think it's not realistic, but then you're working at it for 10 years and then it turns out that it can be done. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I have my YouTube channel where you can subscribe and check out more videos with content like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation.